Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Chestnut Checkers. Normally, I would say I'm your co-host, and I'm here with my other host, Jordan Tampion, but today, that is not the case. So you are getting Keith and Keith alone, which is, it's new, but it's going to be awesome, and I'm excited to be here, and we don't have a guest today either, but I wanted to take some time today to talk to you, our loyal listeners of Chestnut Checkers, and if this is your first show, please like and subscribe if you like today's episode. But ultimately, Jordan and I started this podcast together, and we knew when he started it, and we both have busy schedules and lives, and so getting the both of us in a room all the time as well as guests is a little bit difficult. But also, talking at you guys solo, which we both hope to do throughout the duration of this show, gives us an opportunity to deepen relationship with you, give us a little bit more insight into who we are, but also give you some value through the show. And one of the things that I think is really cool about the Chestnut Checker show is, as me and Jordan put it together, you always want to kind of ask yourself, like, why are we doing this? Like, what's the goal? And with Chestnut Checkers, albeit a quick, like a quippy name, an interesting name of the sense of like playing the long game in both life and business is where we came down to, and really looking at things through the lens of chestnut checkers. And whether you've ever played chess in your life or checkers, the nuance is just that it's a more sophisticated game, right? And as we look at life and we look at business and we look at things that are important to us, sometimes it's important to step back and say, hey, how are we playing the game? And could we play the game a little bit differently? And so this whole evolution of Chestnut Checkers has been interesting, and interviewing our different guests and having people from different walks of life, albeit politicians or athletes or business people, has been really eye-opening, and it's interesting to talk to them and hear common themes and kind of common mantras and different things that come to light when you get an opportunity to really talk to people that are doing something that's worth interviewing, right? Like ultimately, we try to bring people on the show that we not only find interesting, but have done certain things that we maybe value or that we appreciate or that have kind of rose above their peers. And so when you start talking to those sorts of people and you start to hear certain kinds of language, it's always interesting to me to try to break that down. And I might be more of like a nerd than you are, but the goal of today's episode is to really bring you some insight into why listening to this show could maybe help you out with wherever you're at. And I'm assuming if you listen to this show, maybe you do it for just sheer entertainment purposes. But you also, if you're like me, you like to listen to things that you get something out of. And I listen to a lot of podcasts just for entertainment purposes. Maybe people are funny, or maybe they provide interesting perspective. But a lot of times I listen to a lot of podcasts to learn, to try to soak something up and try to add something to my life that maybe I don't currently have, or that I want to sharpen and get some benefit from. So if you're listening to this, my assumption is that you probably listen to podcasts for a similar reason. And today is going to be a little bit more tactical. And I think that when I look at the lens of Chestnut Checkers and how I can impact listeners or talk to you, it's interesting because I hope to talk to you like I would talk to a friend or a family member. And I get a lot of people that come to me for whatever reason, for a little bit of advice in life, albeit here or there, and just a little bit of a backstory. I had a real estate background and a real estate firm, but recently have started like a coaching and consulting company. That's what I do for a living. I coach and consult business owners and entrepreneurs. And I can tell you this, before launching that endeavor, I did a lot of soul searching. And the first reason is imposter syndrome, right? I think if you're going to call yourself a coach or a consultant, or if you're going to have people pay you to have conversations with them about their life, I don't care who you are. There's a little bit of imposter syndrome that can creep in, right? Like, who am I to be telling people what to do with their lives or to be coaching them? And so initially it was hard for me. I had a lot of people that actually had encouraged me over the years to do it. I had past business partners, even past coaches that I'd worked with that had coached me personally, very gently and at different phases say, hey, Keith, we think that you'd be a good coach, or why aren't you coaching people or mentoring people? And initially you just kind of brush it off. And I think it was because of that imposter syndrome or just the phase I was in life. But eventually I kind of heard that calling, and I even leaned into it. And it was, if I'm really honest and candid, it was probably about the same time that I had children as well. I had children in my mid to late 30s and early 40s. And when you start to become a dad, or a mom, I think that you instinctively become like a coach and consultant, like whether you know about it or not, right? Like you have these little creatures that are looking at you all of the time. And I heard it said recently that although your kids may not be listening to you all the time, like as parents, we get really frustrated when our kids don't listen to us. Like, go put your shoes on and clean your room, and they don't do it, and we get frustrated. We're frustrated because they're not listening to us, but make no mistake, they are listening and watching all of the time. And so a lot of times what we get out of our children isn't like obedience, but make no mistake that later in life, they will be modeling the behavior that we as parents are portraying to them, right? So you're kind of like the ultimate role model or example as a parent to your kids because they look to you for that sort of stuff. And so I don't know, about the time I had kids and I kind of heard this calling to become a coach and consultant, and I started down this endeavor. What's interesting to me, and the reason I share this, is that it's similar paths. When I say that I would talk to our listeners today, if you're out there listening to this as a friend, or as a family member, I would also talk to you just like I would talk to one of my kids. And a lot of my coaching sort of framework that I've come up with and that I use with clients, and a lot of like the journaling I do on a weekly basis or the writing that I do is predicated around experiences and conversation that I have both with my coaching clients and with my children in a way that I look to say like, not to share this selfishly, but to actually share it in such a way that like, if I were to get hit by a bus tomorrow, which would be, tragic and unfortunate for my children, what I could leave them are these trails, right? These journal writings, these videos, these podcasts, so that not only could they one day grow up and hope to know their father, but also to understand the way that their father thinks, to understand how he used, logic or reason, or how he interpreted data and information in the world that was coming to him to make important life decisions, career decisions, marriage decisions, relationship decisions. And what I bring this to light only because, again, if you're a listener out there who seeks information or guidance in any sort of way, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a parent, as a coach, I tend to get a lot of the same questions. And so today what I'm hoping to do is I want to kind of break down the top 2 or 3 questions that I get fairly regularly from people who either seek me out for advice based as a client or even just friends and family member. I don't think that I don't say this to be braggadocious. I don't think that people look at Keith and go, "Oh my gosh, he has all the answers." But I do believe that in life, all of us, we watch certain people in our lives that seem to have a pattern of maybe success or a pattern of business success, or their children are just really well mannered, or they can speak very eloquently, or they have a good way of explaining things, or they're good. And when we see people who excel at a certain thing in life, and we see a consistent pattern of that sort of excellence or acceleration or success, we start to kind of tune in. We go, "Hey, man, my neighbor Sally over here, like, I don't know, but she's got something, right? Like, she seems to be consistently above the competition, or she seems to be consistently poised or well-spoken. She seems to be consistently well-thought in her responses." And a lot of times we seek those people out. And I've done it multitudes of times in my life where I've just sought out people based on that sort of internal analysis or their merit and said, "Hey, how do you do that?" Or tell me more about what you do. And it's just like sheer curiosity. And so whether it's been from direct coaching or whether it's been from my kids or whether it's been from people that I've sought out, kind of the top 3 questions that I have asked myself or that I repeatedly get asked that might help you are, first and foremost, it's a how question. And a lot of times people will sit down with me and we'll have a conversation. They'll say, "Keith, either A, how did you do it?" Right? Or how should I do it? Meaning I'm currently in this space or I'm in this place and I need to know what the next step is. I need to know like how I should move forward, or how you did it or how you think I should do it if you were in my shoes. And it's a really interesting question. And I think there's it's not my saying, but there's an old saying in life that if you want to change your life, the easiest way to do it is by changing the questions that you ask. And a lot of us tend to ask lower level questions. And that can result in lower level answers, which results in lower level action and doesn't serve us well in the long run. And so when we look at questions, what I would say is how can be kind of like a mid-tier question. And how you did it or how I should do it really tells me that somebody is in a space where they're typically in movement, they're in process. They've already started a business, they've already had children, they're already down the road a ways, and now they've reached some sort of a roadblock or they're trying to scale to the next place, and they're asking themselves, how, right? And the thing about a how question for me is that typically what they're looking for as a coach and a consultant, what I know is that what they're looking for is they're typically looking for tactics. They're looking for a tool that they need. They're looking for a process or a system that they need to build. And what I will typically respond with is more of a, what are you looking to get question, right? Or a why is that important question. And the reason being is that what I find is that typically the how isn't the problem. And the reason is because there's so much information out there about the how. I can tell you exactly how to build a piece of furniture that comes from IKEA with a set of directions. Now, the process, as we've all know whoever tried to build furniture from IKEA, that can be daunting is, there's directions and it tells you exactly how to do it. And then the whole process of actually doing it can be much more frustrating or much more hard than the instructions make it out, or it's not broken down, right? They skip steps. So the how question, albeit not a bad one, typically is a precursor to there's something else going on, which is they're unclear on why they should be doing it or where it will lead, or they're unclear on what that looks like. And so I would ask you as the listeners out there today, and as you look at your lives, is to say, hey, number one is what kind of questions do I consistently ask of myself or other people? Do I tend to ask how questions? Do I tend to ask what questions? Do I tend to ask why questions? Or as a bonus, do I tend to ask who questions? And I think that as a coach for people, that's really what I'm looking at is I'm asking what kind of questions are they asking of me and of themselves, and then what sort of reframing should occur to really drive them further down the road. And so the next question that typically comes up is like a what question. And what question usually is framed around somebody feels stuck, unmotivated, trapped, lost, scared, resigned. There's a feeling associated. So how is typically tactical. I need to know how you did it or how I should do it, and I'm looking for tactical solutions. But what I would push you towards is that there's typically some underlying thing that you need to dive deeper around as to why it's important. The what question is typically, I'm lost, I'm scared, I'm frustrating. There's some sort of an emotion that I'm actually feeling. And what is the question that I use to tell you that I don't know where to go from here? And again, those people are typically looking more for like a path or a direction or a plan. And that really takes me back to like a mindset or a motivation question, again, of why is this important? And one of the underlying themes that you guys will hear me push towards is mindset. And the reason that I push towards mindset with my parenting and with my coaching and with my basic conversation with friends and family who seek me out for advice, albeit I don't always know why or for whatever reason, but it's because that's typically where most people spend the least amount of time or energy or effort. And it's typically the thing that can move the needle the most. So mindset, in my personal opinion, is made up primarily of two things. It's made up of how you think, right? And it's made up with the relationships that you hold. And the reason I pin it down like that is that mindset has a lot of connotations. You know, people read a lot of books about like winning or success, or, you know, you have to have the eye of a tiger, you have to have this relentless mindset. There's all these kind of trigger words and things. And I think that mindset can really be a lot of times negatively and very inefficiently boiled down to kind of a bootstrap conversation. And what I mean by that is a lot of times the bootstrap conversation is when you go to a friend or a mentor or a person and you seek some advice and they really just kind of give you this slap on the back. You got to dig deep. You got to work hard. You got to just push through conversation. You know, that kind of whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps, keep working, keep grinding, and good things will turn out. And while that is like very often good advice, and it's very often advice that's given to people who need it, it can be very one-dimensional advice. And there's different sort of like nuances and sophistication in life where I think that's not always the answer. I mean, if somebody finds out that they're terminally ill with a brain tumor, they're going to die in 6 months, I don't know that it's appropriate to tell them that they just need to like double down and work hard and push through, right? It can be kind of one-dimensional advice, and it's also one-dimensional advice that we hear a lot in the business and the entrepreneurial world, right? And there's so many stories that get kind of like idolized or that get kind of continually talked about where people were at their wits' end. They were almost bankrupt or broke or busted or didn't know what their next move should be. And they just doubled down and they just worked extra hours and they just came in early and stayed late. And ultimately they reached success. And so then the mantra kind of becomes that cry for like relentless hard work will always persevere. And the reality is it doesn't. And not only does it not, is that it's not even an effective model. Sometimes working harder and working more is actually going to make things worse if the intention or the mindset or the position or the system or the plan is not properly laid out. You can be digging yourself into a deeper hole, so to speak. And so I always will lean back towards that mindset conversation, and I'll frame it around A, how you're thinking about things, and B, who you're in relationship with. And so just to break those two down really succinctly is a lot of times what I find when people are seeking advice from me, and I'll just use a coaching example, is hiring, right? A lot of times I get somebody who says, my business is growing, I need to hire help, I just can't find good help. Everybody I interview is not qualified or unmotivated, or they want to work part-time. I can't seem to find people that really want to work, or I hire them and they're dumb, they're inept, they're lazy, they don't show up. And really a lot of times it's interesting because people don't realize that people are not perfect. And people are not typically intrinsically self-motivated to go work somewhere else for somebody else. And so you hear a lot of these kind of stories. And just to give you some frame of reference here, right? Imagine my life as a coach when I have repeated phone call after phone call after phone call with entrepreneur owner or business owner or small business owner, and they're all telling me the same thing. I can't find good help and I can't find good people, and they're all dumb and they're all lazy and they all don't last very long and they're hiring and firing. And what happens, right, is they end up getting resigned into just, this is just the way that it is, right? And I think that that's a trap that we especially get into as we get older. And so you might be listening to this right now and say, oh my gosh, he's speaking right to me. I have a sprinkler company or lawn care company, or I have a whatever, and everybody I hire, it's like, the first thing I would say is you need to reframe the way you're thinking about it. And so that's why I go back to that mindset conversation of like how you think is important. If you understand that if you show up to interviews, if you show up with hiring, the idea and the mindset behind hiring new people, that they're going to likely be lazy, they're likely going to be inept, they're likely not going to stay here very long, that will transcend into the reality of how that shows up first and foremost. And so you have to start asking some of these other questions like, well, how do I find the motivated people? Where should I be looking? What should I be doing different in my hiring process or in my ads process to seek out employees, or in my new hiring training process? Like, how should I be training them? When should I be training them? How should I be holding them accountable? What tasks should I have them do first and second? What is my first 90-day onboarding plan for a new hire? And when you start asking these sorts of questions, you're changing the thought process behind it, and you can actually simultaneously start changing the mindset that you have. So is it people that are lazy or dumb or inept or just don't want to work, or is it you're seeking the wrong people in the wrong places and you're onboarding them and training them improperly? My assumption is it's probably number two, because if it was number one, then companies would never grow. Amazon wouldn't be able to hire 1,000 employees a month. There's a million other examples out there of companies that have grown through successfully hiring and training great people, building good culture, and scaling businesses. So if it wasn't possible, that'd be one thing, but we have clear examples. But a lot of times what happens is when people have a bad experience or two, their mindset just shifts to this place of, I already know how this is going to turn out. I've never been able to hire and retain good people for a consistent basis, and I can't scale my business because I can't hire and retain good people to help me scale my business. And so you kind of get in this self-perpetuating paradoxical cycle of like, woe is me, this is just the way that it is. But rather than taking ownership for it, rather than looking inward and saying, man, I really need to change the way I'm looking at hiring and training people. I really need to change the way that I'm looking at people in general, or their motivations. It's easier to blame, right? It's easier to look externally and say, they're dumb, they're stupid, they're lazy, they don't want to work. It's a generational thing. It's a cultural thing. And while that might make us feel good or not having to like own our own outcomes, it's actually not going to move the needle for us. And so mindset to me always goes back to listening to the way that people talk. And this is much easier to do, I would say, in a coaching or mentoring relationship. If you are out there right now and any of this is landing with you, what I'd say is one of the questions you might ask yourself right away is like, what sort of coaches and mentors do I have in my life? And who am I having these conversations with? That will be candid with me and will be honest with me when they hear my mindset is weak or is backwards or needs adjustment, right? Like, that could even be your spouse, or that could even be like a dear friend that maybe, you talk about life and business with, and just having the candid, honest conversation with them of like, hey, we talk all the time. You hear me talk about like my business or my process, or you hear me talk about my relationship with my spouse or my relationship with my kids. Like, what am I missing? Like, what am I not asking? And really having that kind of vulnerable moment with somebody to say like, hey, have the tough talk with me. Like, treat me like we're not going to be friends tomorrow, but you want me to know something that really is going to impact my life, right? And so I think that just having those conversations can help. But our mindset is first and foremost. The other thing that I didn't touch on and I want to really quickly is it's not just about how you're thinking. So what I would tell people is any problem that you currently have that you have put a substantial amount of effort into, or at least what you would say a fair amount of effort into solving, but that problem hasn't gone away. It still exists. So just think right now in your life of a problem that's been kind of nagging at you, that you've tried to solve maybe a time or two. You've put a fair amount of concerted effort into, and it hasn't gone anywhere. It still exists. The first question I would say is take that problem right there and analyze the way that you think about it. What are my preconceived notions about this? When I start to think about this, where does my mind immediately go? Do I immediately go to where I'm currently at or the end of it? The second question is who, right? Who have I talked to about this, or who could I talk to about this that might change the way I'm thinking about it? So there's always the corollary in an argument. There's always the like, well, it's easy to go black and white. So it's like, well, if global warming is a farce, well, then the globe's not heating up, right? Like, it's easy to do the opposite, right? Black and white, up and down, left and right. So there's that option. A lot of us are very good at that on our own. We can say, well, if this isn't true, maybe the exact opposite is true. But that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like what is really more of the spectrum of truth that might exist. So that's the first thing I would say is look for a nagging problem, look for a reoccurring issue, look at how you're currently thinking about it, and then explore how you could potentially think about it differently, or who you could talk to help expand or change or reverse and or just offset the mindset that you have around it. And that really goes into the second part of mindset is comprised of not only how we think, it's comprised of the relationships we hold. And by relationships we hold, it's dual fold, right? First and foremost is most of us tend to hold a lot of the same relationships that we always hold, right? We're friends with whoever we're friends with, and therefore we interact with whoever we interact with. Our neighbors are our neighbors, our family are our family. And whether you know it or not, or you're aware of it or not on any consistent basis, those relationships that we currently hold typically are held for reasons of either proximity, convenience, or reassurance to the mindset that we already have. Meaning, we like people that think like us. We like people that support the thinking that we already have. If you're my friend and we're drinking a beer and I'm bitching about my employees being a bunch of idiots and you're like, yeah, Keith, people are just idiots, dude. I got the same problem in my business. Like half of them are just a bunch of idiots. We're reaffirming each other's mindset and each other's thoughts, whether we know it or not. And as a matter of fact, that's going to kind of feel good. Like subconsciously, it's going to kind of feel good for me to be like, yeah, I'm validating my thoughts and my feelings by bouncing them off somebody else and then getting reassurance because they're also mimicking those same sort of thought patterns. And what happens is not only is that self-reassurance going to, good behavior, good mindset or bad mindset. If it's good mindset, that's great, right? Like that's why it's important to have great peer groups and great friends and great mentors. But if it's bad mindset, it's also really bad because we're reaffirming through social proof with friendship potentially harmful or negative mindset. But similarly, it's also putting us in a position where we tend to believe in that mindset more concretely, right? We're actually our ability to deviate our mindset is going to be a lot harder because it's not just our own mindset we're fighting. We're now fighting the mindset of our family members, our spouse, our friends, our neighbors, the other people that we associate with. And if you've ever tried to go against the grain of something that maybe you've held closely, what you find very quickly is you also tend to probably start to have problems with other people who hold those same truths, who know that you also hold those truths. Because they're going to start to take problems with it very quickly when they notice the differences or the changes in your attitude or your speech patterns or even the way that you think. So if I have a friend that I show up and have beers with every week and we bitch about our employees being a bunch of idiots and how his employees are, holding his business back and mine are holding my back, and all of a sudden I start to show up and go, you know what, maybe they're not the problem. Like maybe we've been thinking about this wrong. Like maybe people are really good and we just need to seek a different place. They're immediately going to try to shut that down. They're going to be like, what are you talking about? We've been down that before. You've hired shitty people before. I've hired shitty people before. Like people are pretty shitty. Like, because now you're going to be challenging their mindset as well as your own. And so, classic examples of this are like, people that try to leave really devout religions, right? You grow up in a religious household, you try to leave that religion. Like that's not typically going to set well with the family, right? Like they're not going to all of a sudden want you questioning all of the family's, religious beliefs and saying, well, maybe that's not true. And maybe we should think about it differently. This is going to become threatening. And so the aha that I want you to have here, the realization is that, albeit one of the most important things when you approach any situation is your mindset, because it dictates the way that you approach it and it dictates the action that you take. To get different results means that we need to change our mindset, and i.e. that's going to be difficult because it's seated in us and it's seated in the relationships we have around it. And so the biggest way that you can change anything in your life, that problem, that nagging problem that won't go away, that you've tried to solve, that keeps showing up, is to find a way to change your mindset around it, and or find a person or a relationship that will help you change it. And the example that I always use here is like health and physical fitness. Health and physical fitness are fairly easy things to solve. And not always, right? There's certain people have different medical complications and this and that, but let's just be candid, right? Eat a little bit less and do a little bit more activity. I don't think this is rocket science. And there's a million different ways to do that. The reality is caloric intake, right? Close your mouth, eat less calories, do more activity, caloric burn. You will get, skinnier or thinner or in better shape. If you want to build muscle, you have to lift heavy things. Like these are not things that are necessarily misunderstood. And similarly with life and with business. And so like a lot of times when people come to me for advice, the issue with coming to anybody for advice or hiring a coach or a consultant is they're going to very often kind of hold a mirror up. Or they're very often going to tell you things that you don't want to hear, or that are kind of personal, because albeit like 90% of our problems are typically ourselves, right? It's the way that we're approaching situations or thinking about situations or taking certain actions or not taking certain actions. So going back to the health and fitness thing is, The bootstrap conversation is like, yo, Keith, you want to get in better shape? Shut your mouth, go to the gym, work out more. Like, hey, buddy, I don't want to hear it. Let's go. That's that kind of bootstrap. But the thing is, it doesn't always work. And so what I tell people, the cool thing about the relationship aspect is you can get in a relationship with somebody who helps you get motivated to go to the gym, or who helps you maybe create different eating habits or a diet that you've never followed before. Like I call a friend who eats very carnivore, or I call a friend who's vegan, or I call a friend, I say, hey, listen, man, I just want to let you know that like I'm looking to do something different with my health and fitness. And I don't know that we've ever had these conversations, but I would really like to sit down and talk to you about like your diet and your nutrition, how you look at food, how you look at like meal prep. When you go out to a restaurant, what do you do? Like we're creatures of habit. So like, I don't even know what else to order. Like what would be a good supplement for this seed oil if I don't want to use seed oils? And really through relationship, you can actually create a lot of new habits and behaviors. But what you'll also be doing is you'll be introducing yourself to things and to ideas that will start to slowly reshape your mindset. And so mindset, albeit the foundation, is a very tricky thing past a certain age to change yourself without a lot of resolve or without a lot of help. And that help can come through like crisis, and it can come through, life experiences that are outside of your control, or it can come through things that you do intentionally. So I always try to encourage people. I say, listen, after the age of about 25, whether you know it or not, your behavior is fairly rooted in who you are. Your ability to change who you are, to change your daily activity or your routines, your behaviors, like past the age of about 24, 25, is extremely hard, barring uprooting yourself, moving to a different town, creating completely new relationships, or like a life-changing event, like you find out you're terminal with a brain tumor, you get in a tragic car accident where you almost die, or you have unfortunately some friends or family or loved ones that you care about pass away, like some major, you go through a divorce, you have a kid that has special needs, like. A lot of people, when you talk to them and they've gone through massive changes in your life, they're typically correlated to like some sort of massive event that was potentially outside of their control, or some sort of an uprooting, right? And what I tell people is like, listen, we don't want to wait for those. We don't want to sit around and wait for those, and we can't affect it if we do. And so we got to control what we can control, which is the way that we currently think, recognizing the patterns of thoughts that we have, and the relationships that we currently hold, and whether those relationships help or hinder or support the mindsets that we ultimately want, that will lead to the actions that we ultimately hold of a high value or of importance to us. So the mindset is the start, and it goes back to the way we think and the relationships we hold. But I'm going to transcend this a little bit, and I'm going to speed it up only to say that when it comes back to these questions that I get, and the first we talked about was the how, and the second we talked about was the what. The third one is typically it's a why question. And a lot of times what I find is that tends to be like more existential. And I find that it tends to happen to people on both sides of the spectrum, whether they've seen a lot of success in their life, and then they get to this point of like, man, I actually set out to do this thing, and I've done it, and I've done it really well, and I've actually had success, and it's growing, and maybe financially and successfully everything is fine, but at some point they start to question the why behind it. Like, is this really what I want to do with my life? Why am I working so hard? Why do I want to get bigger next year than I was last year, even if that's been my modus operandi for the last 10 years? Because more just becomes more. And sometimes what we find is that if you ever heard the phrase like midlife crisis, it's real, right? I actually had a coach of mine tell me this. He's like, Keith, midlife crises are extremely real. And the reason that he was saying that is because I was lamenting to him about a situation I was in, and I was like, man, I don't know. His name is Mike Fleming, great guy, great business coach I had years ago. But I said, man, Mike, I don't know. I might be going through a midlife crisis. And he looked at me and he's like, yeah, you're going through a midlife crisis. You're absolutely going through a midlife crisis. But he goes, what, did you think those weren't real? Did you think that you were immune to them? Like, did you think they were something that just Hollywood made up for movies? And I think at the time I kind of was like, yeah, I did. maybe I kind of did. Like I thought they were just funny, quippy ways that like, some angry housewife explained away her husband, buying a red Corvette. Like, oh, John's going through a midlife crisis. And I think as a kid, you hear that and you just think like that's, it's a thing that people use to explain away like when someone makes a drastic decision or something. But he's like, no, he's like, they're very real. And he goes, the reason that they're real is because he's like, they're a natural part of life. Just, when you grow up, and going through like adolescence or, going from being a baby to a toddler to an adolescent to like to a young man, like there's phases in life that we all go through. And yeah, midlife crisis, if you live long enough, is kind of one of them. And he said, the reason is because you start to realize your own mortality in some sense. And while we might all have, and again, I'm not making light if you've ever had a friend or a family or a loved one pass away that's impacted you. I'm not making light of that at all. But if we've all had those experiences in our life, but if you're 15 years old, if you're 10 years old, if you're 20 years old, most of the time we can look at those situations, or we will look at those situations as humans, and we'll say, man, that's really tragic. That I had a classmate in high school or college pass away. But then we'll very quickly say, and that's an outlier, and boy, I sure hope that doesn't happen to me, but move on with your life. And it's not as impactful because even though you've dealt with life and death and life being cut short or thought about your own mortality, it doesn't tend to land or hit until a certain age. And he goes like, I can't tell you if that's 40 or 45 or 50, but at some point, and this is one of the triggers to like a midlife crisis, at some point, you will have to wrestle with the fact that you're mortal. You'll have to wrestle with your own mortality. And that typically happens around midlife, right? Like at some point in your life. And for a variety of reasons, because the unfortunate, tragedies or death or things, disease start to become more prevalent in your life, right? You start to get to 40, 50 years old, and more of your friends, you get sick with things they didn't see, or maybe you personally experience it, or, more people have bad things happen. So it becomes more real, but then you also start to realize that your days are numbered. And so he said that's kind of the first trigger. The first trigger is like, to a midlife crisis is, some sort of a realization of your own mortality, or at least more closely wrestling with that reality is the first and foremost. And of course, then that's going to trigger a natural response or a reaction where whether you're a deeply philosophical person who reflects all the time, or whether you're not at all and maybe, should reflect more, at some point in time when you come to that crossroads in your life, it will force introspection. Like it will force you to go inside and to look and to say, man, if I am mortal, like, did I screw this thing up? Like, did I do it right? Should I have done something different with my life? Do I want to do something different with my life? Should I have not, spent so much time worried about X, Y, and Z? Should I have spent more time? And you see this, right? Especially with middle-aged people. If you sit down and talk to them at all, or you sit down with elderly people in like a nursing home and you look back on life, they will tell you events, the Great Depression, or they'll tell you about World War II, or they'll say all these kind of paramount events that they remember. I remember where I was when JFK got shot or whatever. But then they will also tell you, they will lament. They will typically tell you regrets. I really wish I'd have spent more time with my kids. I really wish I wouldn't have been as hard on my friend John when I found out, he was moving away and I decided not to talk to him, or whatever. Like they'll go into this sort of these introspective moments. And so where I'm leading with this is that as you start to look at your life, no matter what, you're going to go through these crossroads where you start to analyze, why are things of importance, and how do I measure that? And so that's really why this last question, this why question, I think is one of the most powerful. And again, it's a place that a lot of us don't spend a ton of time. And I think it's for good reason. I think it's for, first and foremost, the reason that when we are younger, it doesn't seem as important, and we are more preoccupied with things that we feel are of more importance. So career success, popularity, friends, parties, things, events, traveling, probably more surface level, maybe even, albeit call it hedonistic or whatever pleasures, they tend to take more importance because we're just kind of in this sort of raging aspect of our life of experience. We want to just experience it all. We want to see the crystal blue water of the Caribbean. We also want to climb a tall mountain. We also want to, go on dates and meet lots of people. We want to and we don't really take the time to sit down and go, why is this important? What should I be doing with my life? And for good reason. But the other aspect that I think really pushes this question farther down the road than it should, while I'm okay with adolescents and children not necessarily grabbing onto these real hard why questions at a young age, although I would encourage them to, the other aspect of it is it tends to stay pushed away too long and for too much time because it's an uncomfortable question. It's an uncomfortable question, and it's not always an easily answered question, and it requires of us some energy and effort and thought that is not always convenient and comfortable. And so you get to a lot of these midlife crisis points, and a lot of people start to kind of, for their first time in their life, question or to have, some retrospective thought about, did I do it all right? Where should I go? What should I do? And it's that time in their life where they start to really, for the first time, have these sort of man, what is important to me and why is it important to me conversations? What I would encourage you today as a listener to do is to really, if I could leave with three things, it would be start to identify the things in your life that are not where you currently want them, or that you would even just like to be a little bit different. I have a good relationship with my spouse. I'd like to have a great relationship with my spouse. I have an okay relationship with my father, but I would like to have a better relationship with my father. My business is running at an 8 out of 10, but I really wish I could get to the next level. Whatever it is, start to identify the things in the areas in your life where you would just like them to be a little bit different, and then start to look at the mindset, the way that you think about that thing, and the relationships that you hold around that thing. And so just breaking down really quickly is if I want a better relationship with my dad, I say, man, Keith, I got a good relationship with my dad, but I like a better one. Well, first and foremost, how am I thinking about my relationship with my dad? Right now, if I were to pick my phone up and call him, am I saying to myself, man, he doesn't want to be bothered, or he's probably at work right now, or he's going to think it's weird if I just call him in the middle of the day. I never call him in the middle of the day, right? We'll all of a sudden start to just, you become very aware of all of these thoughts that you have that have led you right to where you are. And albeit good or bad, right? You're not going to beat yourself up with it. But the reason that I have the relationship with my father that I currently have is because of those thoughts right there. I don't call him in the middle of the day. I'm worried about what he'd think if I call him in the middle of the day. He might think there's a problem, or that something's wrong, or he'd think it was weird, or I might interrupt it. But if I keep those same thoughts and then I keep my same actions, then simultaneously is I'll never actually have the relationship that I desire to have with my father unless I can change that mindset, right? And so that's just a quick example of that. Another thing would be to find somebody else in your life that you think has a great relationship with their parent, and chat them up about it. Talk to them about it. Say, hey, I noticed that you and your mom are really close. I noticed that you and your dad are really close. What are the top 2 or 3 things that you do to keep that relationship going that way? Whether they're natural for them or not. They might tell you that it's very unnatural. And you know what? In my calendar every Wednesday, I have a note at 8:00 that says, call my mom, tell mom you love her. Maybe it's very tactical like that. Or maybe they're just a person who's you know what? I call my mom every day. I don't know why. I just have done it ever since I was 16. It's well, great. Whether that's uncomfortable for you or not, I'm now developing a relationship with somebody who I appreciate their relationship with their parents, and I can just steal tactics, right? I can just borrow things that they do and say, okay, Keith, this is going to feel really weird, but you're just going to call your dad every day. I'm just going to call my dad every day, and I'm just going to try it out for a month. I'm just going to try it out for 2 weeks. I'm just going to call my dad every day and say, hey, Dad, it's Keith. What's going on? And no matter how awkward it is, he says, yeah, do you need something? Is everything okay? I'm going to say, yeah, everything's fine, Dad. No, I don't need anything. Just calling to see how you were. Just wanted to touch base. How's your week? And it's surprising how simple. I want you to pick this up. It's surprising how simple a lot of times what we preconceive major change in our life can be. And as a coach and a consultant for a living, I run into that all the time. It's amazing to me, kind of the mountain out of a molehill that somebody has built a lot of times around the distance between where they're at and where they want to go is, and how quickly it can be solved with just some simple action. But a lot of times we've thwarted that, right? We don't want it to be that simple. When a problem's been plaguing us for so long, if we've been struggling with something for 3 years, for 5 years, for our lifetime, for Pete's sakes, we don't want a simple solution, because if there was a simple solution, that would mean that in some way, we were dumb, or that we were inept, or that it comes back on us harder if it's like, man, there's this really simple solution that could have been solved. But you know what? What I would tell you is, again, that's a mindset problem. Going back to that's another thing you're dragging in. So the point there is like, really, it doesn't matter what you want in life, but I would say today, if I can leave you with 3 things, it's identify things that you want difference in your life, and then look at the way that you're currently thinking about them, or the relationships that you could either add or currently hold around them that need to change. And then the very last thing that I would say is tackling the fear around it is the second largest hurdle, because there's a disconnect between knowing and doing. So everything I've said today, if it's landed with you at all, there's a good chance that your head's going up and down. You're like, you know what, Keith, I see it now. I see the way you're explaining it. That makes sense. Okay, if I want to change things in my life, I got to change the way I'm thinking about them, or I got to change the relationships I have. Cool, got it. But now there's a disconnect between knowing and doing. Just like there's a disconnect between knowing and doing with your golf swing, right? I can sit down and watch videos of Tiger Woods in his prime and hitting the driving range, and somebody can tell me, like, do you see the way his hands are gripped? Yeah, I see the way his hands are gripped. Do you see the way his hips shift? Yeah, I see the way his hips shift. And they can break down that swing to a T, and they'll say, okay, Keith, now you know the body mechanics, the grips, the everything that goes into a perfect swing. I say, okay, yeah, now I know. And then they say, okay, great, here's a club, go do it. Well, but now I'm lost. Because I haven't done it, right? Like, knowing is not doing. So I want to back this up here just a little bit as we close out today, and to say the biggest hurdle is going to be fear, because you can use ignorance for a while and say, well, I just didn't know. Well, that goes away pretty quick after childhood, right? Because it's on you to either figure it out or find the person who can help you figure it out. But once you realize that, like, okay, it's knowledge is no longer the problem, now it's action. The biggest hurdle to action is fear. And the reason the biggest hurdle to action is fear is because it's going to go back into questioning everything that we know about that thing, or it's going to put us in a position where we need to change our mindset or our neural pathways around something. And so I'll just give you a little bit, a tidbit about this is there are typically like 3 parts to your brain, right? And there are typically or 3 major parts. There's a lot of parts of your brain, but there is your instinctive mind that really is like your fight, flight, or freeze sort of go-to. There is your conscious mind, which is all the things that you're consciously aware of, and it's that voice that talks to you in your head all day long. And then there is your subconscious mind. So if there are 3 things, it is your instinctive mind, your conscious mind, and your subconscious mind. And ultimately, we live in a conscious mindset most of the time, and till something happens and we get scared. And if we get scared and that whole like fight, flight, or freeze instinctive mind takes over, when it takes over, our abilities, our conscious abilities get thwarted drastically, right? Most of our subconscious and our conscious mind pretty much will shut off, and they do that intentionally because back in the day, as your brain was evolving, if a lion ran out of a cave, or if a pack of wolves started chasing you, sitting around contemplating your being, or what the purpose for your life is, or whether you want a better relationship with your father, didn't mean anything in that 30-second moment. All that meant anything was like running, climbing a tree, hiding, right? And so when our instinctive mind kicks in and our fight, flight, and freeze is enacted, understand that our ability to consciously and subconsciously think our way out of things, or to even have that part of our mind, really gets thwarted very quickly. And then ask yourself this question, because while the idea or the concept of wolves or a mountain lion is something we go, oh yeah, that would be scary. Based on current times, how much of your day or how often in your week or your month do you have feelings of anxiety? How often do you have feelings of depression? How often do you have feelings of fear? Understand there is a massive, and maybe you're part of it. And again, no judgment. This isn't here nor there. But there's a massive portion of the population who's currently medicated for things like anxiety, depression, poor sleep. And, as a society, we have said, hey, this will help fix these problems. But understand that if you are battling things like chronic anxiety, that instinctive part of your brain is enacted 60, 70, 80, 90% of the day, or might only even be subdued when medication is taken, right? And so it's going to thwart our ability to consciously, a lot of times, change our mode of action and fix our own problems. So that's first and foremost, is just understanding that and looking at your life or your situation and going, man, if I'm in a constant state of fear or anxiety or depression, like I'm going to have a hard time with change regardless. And so the reason I bring this up is because that separation between knowing and doing is, as soon as you don't know how to do something, or as soon as you need to take action that you have not previously taken, that fear and that anxiety will creep in. It will creep in, and it will creep in naturally, and it will creep in subtly. Just because if you've never taken a golf swing, or even if you've taken a few golf swings and someone shows you Tiger swing and you break down the mechanics and you know it, and then they hand you a club and say, great, go hit. Anybody's going to get a little anxious. Oh gosh, now I know all this stuff. Like maybe they're watching me. Like what was the grip again? Like how are my feet? Like anytime we have to do something that we have not done before, we're going to naturally have a little bit of fear. So understanding that is first and foremost, and then learning to control that is another aspect. So what I tell people a lot of times is when you're faced with a scenario that you've identified something you want different, you need to change your mindset or your relationships around it. Great, this is all knowledge, Keith. But now I need to get into the action of approaching those people that I care about to ask them for help, or I need to get an action of calling my father that I haven't called every day. Whatever that is, one of the best things that can help me is knowing before I even start that Keith, you know what? This is going to feel a little bit scary for you. This is going to feel kind of uncomfortable for you. And with that fear and with that uncomfortability, your instinctive mind is going to be screaming at you not to do it. It's going to be screaming at you after the very first phone call to dad that was a little awkward not to call him tomorrow because, man, that was super awkward. And I knew that was going to be awkward. And he doesn't want me to call him in the middle of the day. And he's totally busy with other stuff. And why am I calling? And there we go. We got that like sort of runaway train. And so knowing that just means that we're going to have to deal with that. And so what I tell people is when change needs to occur, we need to address that, because if we don't address that, ultimately that's going to be the sabotage, right? That negative self-talk and all of that history of behavior and emotion and feeling that has got us wired the way that we currently are, that has us in the relationships we currently are, that's going to fight us hand, tooth, and nail. And now, setting this topic aside, okay, Keith, great, got it, instinctive mind. We need to be ready for that. We need to calm that down. We need to take measures to make sure that doesn't take control. Now this leaves us with two parts of our brain. This leaves us with our conscious brain, and this leaves us with our subconscious brain. Our conscious brain, and this has been proven through neuroscience and a variety of other things, can be aware of anywhere, they say, between like 40 and 60 things at any given point in time. I'm going to split the difference with you and say 50. Okay, so let's say we can consciously be aware of 50 things at any given point in time. We have about 10,000 neural receptors in our brain, which means that our mind, like our brain, is actually aware of about 10,000 things at any given moment, or has the ability to be. And there's been a variety of different like science and tests and neuroscience that can prove and has proven that we're aware of a lot more than we pay attention to, and our awareness can be brought, our attention and our awareness can be brought to things that we weren't, and then it shows up for us. And a great example that I like to use of this is they call it a scotoma, I believe. And I heard a gentleman explain it this way, and he said, I want you to close one of your eyes. And if you close one of your eyes, I want you to ask yourself, can you see the tip of your nose? So if you close your right eye and only your left eye is open, can you see the tip of your nose? Yes, you absolutely can. And if you do it the other way, same thing. If you close your left eye and only your right eye is open, can you see the tip of your nose? And the answer is yes, you absolutely can. And if you can't, there's probably something wrong with you and you should go see your optometrist. But if you just did that exercise really quickly with me, which is hard not to, I'm doing it right now, the answer is yes. So then this begs the question of, if my left eye sees my nose and my right eye sees my nose, how come I don't see my nose when both my eyes are open? And there's a very simple answer. And it's because your brain has told you that it's not of importance, right? It's not that you're not aware of it. It's not that you're not actually getting the sensory input from your eyeball to your brain to say, oh, there's my nose. It's that your brain, through a process, has said, it would be really silly if we constantly made Keith aware of the tip of his nose all the time. It would be really weird and actually distracting and probably not serve him very well if he was driving a car, operating a piece of equipment, or doing anything in life, trying to write an essay to get into college, if he was just constantly seeing the tip of his nose. So what we're going to do as a favor to Keith is we're just going to block that signal. We're just going to actually make him not aware of it consciously. Like, he doesn't consciously need to be aware of the tip of his nose. So we're going to help him out. We're just going to say, yeah, let's not make Keith aware of the tip of his nose. Now, that is an example. I think they call it a scotoma, and it's like an example of like a real life blind spot, right? That's like, a lot of times you hear people talk about blind spots, like, oh, Johnny doesn't know he has these blind spots about this, or Sally doesn't know, or what are your blind spots? And that is an example of a real life blind spot. It's an example of our mind saying this is not important information to constantly be telling him. We're going to make him blind to it. We're going to create a blind spot just so it's not a distraction. It doesn't serve him well. Understand this. This is the relationship right now that I'm talking about between your conscious and your subconscious mind. Meaning, you might consciously be aware of 40 to 60 things at any given point in time. And the 40 to 60 things that you are consciously aware of are typically things that your subconscious brain has actually already decided are the 40 or 60 things that you should be aware of. Meaning, even though we like to think we're in control, and even though we like to think that consciously, like I want to know these things, and I'm the one telling my brain these are the 30 or 40 or 50 things that I should be paying attention to or want to know. Realistically, our subconscious brain has actually already, based upon our history, based upon our behavior, based upon the things that we have told it that are of importance to us, it has already kind of helped self-select those 40 to 50 things. So in any given moment, more likely than not, we are actually being made aware of the things consciously that our subconscious brain has deciphered. There's 10,000 things here. So I'm going to essentially categorize or block or store 9,950 bits of information. And I'm going to let Keith see these other 50. And the reason I'm going to let Keith see these other 50 is because Keith has told me either directly via like conscious decisions or thoughts or processes, or indirectly via his behavior or his history, that these are the 50 things that are probably of the most importance that will serve him. The subconscious mind is your best friend or your worst enemy, depending on how you've trained it or communicated with it. And I'll say this as a caveat. Most people have not trained or communicated with it intentionally in their entire lives because they don't know how, and that's fine. Don't beat yourself up for it. But this is we can dive deep here, but we're not going to. And it's your best friend and it's your worst enemy. But the reality is whether it is your best friend or worst enemy, it itself is neutral. All it wants to do is serve you. So your subconscious mind isn't saying, man, I want to sabotage Keith's day. And it's not saying, man, I want to make Keith's day a huge win. What it's saying is Keith needs to know these things based on what Keith has previously told me or his behaviors or his history has shown. And I just want Keith to get what Keith needs. So going back to like the diet and exercise example, as a lot of times we wake up one day or one week and we say, I want to change my life. I want to get in better shape. I'm going to start to eat better and I'm going to start to exercise. And day one, we start in and all of a sudden we pack a bag of carrots for lunch and we're going to go to the gym after work and all of this stuff. Now, here's the thing is that fight, flight, or freeze, that instinctive mind, right, will take over. if we're not careful, because this is new behavior. It's going to be scary. What are the people at the gym going to think when I'm not lifting very many weights? Or what happens if there's somebody there who tries to talk to me? I don't want to talk to anybody. Or maybe I put my headphones on, or maybe that's going to happen, right? So we got to compartmentalize that. We got to deal with that. But now also we're going to have to deal with this other situation, which is if this is not routine behavior for us, our subconscious mind that wants to serve us, if our subconscious mind believes or understands that, you know what, Keith woke up today and says he wants to eat different and he wants to go to the gym. But what I really know, because Keith has done this a few times before, what I really know is that what Keith wants more than anything today is he wants something to come up or something to happen so that he doesn't actually have to go to the gym. Because he doesn't really want to go to the gym. I know he says he wants to get in better shape and go to the gym, but what he really wants is to find a reason not to, because history has shown us that he'll do this thing for like 2 or 3 weeks, then it kind of fizzles and he doesn't really stick with it, or, then it makes him feel worse about himself because he didn't commit to his diet like he should have, or now he's eating even worse. So to protect Keith, we're going to actually look for bits of information, and we're going to look for things today that we can bring up to his attention so that maybe he has a reason today. Oh, you know what? My favorite lender called. He invited me to lunch. I haven't talked to him forever. I need to go have him. I'll start my diet tomorrow. Today I'm going to go meet my favorite lender for lunch. And it's business related. I need to keep these relationships up. I really need to go to this lunch, and I don't want to be the weird guy that shows up with a bag of carrots at a restaurant. So I'll start my diet tomorrow. Oh, you know what? My sister called and her hot water tank went out, or she's not getting hot water. Maybe I'll go over there after work instead of the gym. If I still have time, I'll go over. And so this is what happens, right? This is why change is so hard, is we have an instinctive mind that's going to enact our fight, and freeze. And we have our subconscious mind that's bringing stuff to our attention that it believes based on our history and based upon our life experience that we want. And this is why we have such a hard time consciously making change in our life. So I'm going to wrap a little bow on this for you guys today. If you've lasted with me this long, is if you really want to make a change in your life, what I can tell you is the 3 biggest steps are: A, start to identify the things that you want, a difference and a change in your life. Number 2, start to analyze the current mindset and the current relationships that you hold around those things. And number 3 is that if and when you decide to adopt new mindset, new relationships, or new actions to make those changes, that you need to be prepared and you need to put steps into place to condition yourself away from the fear, the anxiety, and the battle that the conscious, subconscious, and instinctive mind is going to wage. And if you don't understand the entire depth of it, nobody here has to become a hypnotist. Nobody here has to become a psychologist to do this. Like I said, the reason that I'm passionate about coaching and consulting people for a living is that I get to play a role in this process. But what I can tell you is simple wins. And it doesn't have to be like neuroscience level to win. But what I would say today is whether this information landed with you, whether you already knew this and maybe I added a little bit of insight, or whether you've never even heard anybody talk like this, I would start to be aware of it, would be first and foremost. And then again, seeking relationships and systems and habits that can help support it. So why all of that is good theory and good knowledge, what I can tell you is here at Chestnut Checkers, one of the things that I love is these interviews that we're doing. And one of the things that I hope is that myself and Jordan and our guests can start to help you with, again, these same sort of patterns. Start to identify the way that the people that we interview think. How do these entrepreneurs and these, restaurateurs or these business owners think? Like, what is their process about how they wake up in the morning, how they approach employees, how they approach hiring, how they approach scaling? Like, start to dig in, even as you listen, with this sort of concept of like, focusing in on their mindset, focusing in on like the relationships that they hold, focusing in on where in their life do they see they need change, or have they gone through hard change? And was that related to a major life event or choice? And if it was a choice, what sort of things led to that choice? And then how did they go through that process? And if you start to do this, I promise you, then change becomes easier in your life, because now you have models to follow. Right? And just like our children, who may not always listen to us, but they watch and they listen, and we become their ultimate model. I would be honored, and I would really enjoy the idea that Chestnut Checkers could be that model for people. So if you get anything out of this conversation, if you get anything out of today, please continue to listen, hit that like and subscribe button. And if you have a friend or a family member where this stuff landed with you and you're like, you know what, I have a friend who needs to hear this or who's also in this tough spot, share the show with them. Because like I said, there'd be nothing that would make me more happy and proud than to have Chestnut Checkers be that modeling. And the guests that we have are awesome, and Jordan's great. And so that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for joining in. This is the first solo Keith Chestnut Checker show. And like I said, hit that like and subscribe button. Hope to see you guys again next week with some more great guests and Jordan back with me. Take care. All right, you guys, thanks for listening to today's episode. While you're out there, would you please do us a favor and give us a like, subscribe, or a follow, whether you listen on Spotify, iTunes, or YouTube. We'd really appreciate it. Also, if you don't mind while you're there, give us a 5-star review. Maybe write a review. If you have a favorite episode, feel free to give it a like. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate it.